people were standing up to talk about the film. And then somebody stood up and he said, so you made this film, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, Like, I just feel that we don't make honest cinema. Like, we're not being true to ourselves. Whatever that is, we're just making what we think is what people want to see. And then it shows, there's no real paperwork. Like even when somebody says 1 billion, like how do you show me? Just to be clear, I've always seen myself as a guy who makes films that are commercial.
Hello, welcome to the Good News Niger podcast. My name is Desmond Ebekunwe. Today, our guest is CJ Obasi, known as Fury. CJ Obasi represents a radical reimagining of African cinema, from its origins in Owerri to international film festival acclaim. CJ Obasi has emerged as a critical architect of contemporary African storytelling, challenging traditional narratives and expanding the global understanding of Nigerian filmmaking. It's critically acclaimed works like Ojuju and Mami Watan. Just like a few days ago, I saw Old Town. Beautiful storytelling are more than films. They are profound cultural dialogues, demonstrating how cinema can be a powerful medium for cultural exploration, social commentary, and artistic innovation. We did stand a lot on business on this conversation, and you'd love it. Please enjoy. All right, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I'm very excited and then also very anxious about where this conversation goes. And during, I was at S16 a few days ago, and I was speaking to a friend about how I get very anxious about when I meet people that I truly care about their work or truly rate. And you're one of those people. So I'm very grateful that you accepted to be on this podcast.
My pleasure.
So my very first question would be around, personally, as someone who wants to make films that are important, I look up to you in so many ways because you've done some of the things I've penned in my personal vision board and to do in the next 2 years, 5 years, or even 10 years, because they are really big goals if you think about them. But then I want to reflect 10 years ago, like when you made your first film. Did you imagine that you'd be here now?
The simple answer is yes. Yeah, I did. We all have like huge ambitions. I came from a very small town, but I had big dreams of, about where I wanted to be, the kind of filmmaker I wanted to be. So yeah, I did, hope that I would achieve all of that. But you get so caught up doing everything you need to do to try to achieve it, that when you eventually achieve it, it's like, oh, wow, I did it. So it's still as much of a surprise. Even till today, I still pinch myself that I'm really doing it. And certainly the people that I grew up in Owerri with, like my childhood friends, and I still get messages from them till today, like, guy, you really did it, because everyone knew all my, everything I wanted to do growing up.
I grew up in Benin City, and I understand what it's like to grow up in a small city. So now we see a lot of people trying to make films in Benin City, in other smaller cities, move back to Enugu to make films, Ibadan, all those small cities are becoming film havens. But 10 years ago, when I was moving to Lagos, it seemed like I was being the black sheep who was trying to just break out from the family. And then I knew I wanted to do stuff in the media and film, but then I wasn't sure the extent, I wasn't sure the scale because of how far and the things I could see, because there wasn't any template. I was the first person doing it in my family. The people I was engaging in the community, I was perhaps the first person. So when you now hear these people from your city saying that you did it, what did that look like for you back then when you were still in the city, when you're dreaming of success, when you're dreaming of being big? What was that dream like?
That's a very interesting question because, I remember talking about wanting to be a filmmaker. I would always reference the obvious filmmakers, Spielberg, Scorsese, Lucas, those were like the big filmmakers that were very present and that everyone knew. So it really sounded crazy, especially, hearing it from a teenager. It's like, oh yeah, you're going to be, at the Oscars, you're going to be at the, the big awards, Sundance, all of these things. So it was crazy, but I had this idea, or at least what I thought would be a plan. In my town, where there wasn't really a filmmaking industry as such. So, I mean, I knew that the industry was mainly in Lagos, and I was in Owerri. So, I for the longest time, I couldn't figure out how I was going to pull it off, but I had this idea that I would be like an author first, like a writer first. So, and that made more sense to me. Again, being Igbo, there's a lot of Igbo authors who, grew up either in Owerri or in Enugu or, Anambra and all of that. So it seemed like there was more of a precedence to be an author as a kid growing up in the East. So the plan was, be an author, and then when I become successful as an author, then I would just adapt all the books I wrote into films, because then I would have the money and the access and all of that. So that was what I was thinking to do as a writer. Obviously, that didn't work out. So I ended up, going to school. I studied computer science.
No books.
No books. I mean, I wrote what I thought would be a book, but it's not published, obviously. But this was kind of like how I envisioned it would go. It didn't work out that way. I ended up going to school and studying computer science at UNN. And then when I finished, did my service in Abuja, started working for a bit, same place. And I was really miserable, to be honest, because the dream of being a filmmaker never left me, not even for a second. And so the reality of being an adult who was working and earning a salary, really depressed me, because that wasn't what I hoped to be my livelihood. I hoped my livelihood would be film. I hoped I would make a living from being a filmmaker. And so when I was earning a living doing something else, I felt like I was becoming more and more trapped in this life. And I started to see myself 10 years, well now, I started to see myself 10 years into the future, being married with 2.5 kids, driving a minivan, living in a 3-bedroom apartment, like all of these normal things, but it used to scare the hell out of me. I used to just wake up with panic attacks. It was really that bad.
Because when you think about it, like 3-bedroom marriage.
Yeah. Those things that are like good, but having all of that because I am not doing what I really wanted to do was a nightmare to me. That was it had the opposite effect on me. And I used to have crazy panic attacks, I remember. Until one day I just couldn't bear it anymore, and I just resigned. Just literally woke up, typed out my resignation and submitted it and bailed out. That was it. And and then here we are.
Do you know the funny thing about this is I did the same thing last week, Thursday.
No way.
So I typed my resignation at 4 a.m. So I woke up with a very strong resolution. Mm-hmm. That was the right move.
Yeah.
But because I had this really good relationship with my boss, mm-hmm. and he's allowed me in the last 3 years, he's allowed me experiment with film while having a full-time job with him. So it did not make sense to my family that I would just fully resign. Yeah. And it also did not make sense to him because we've moved from having a relationship, from just working relationship where he's now like a real life mentor. It did not make sense that I was just going to up and leave the show. But then I did last Thursday, and he said we should have a conversation. Till now, we've not had that conversation. But for me, I know that I really want to throw myself in. I don't feel like I'm cheating on both, and not feel like, because I like doing the other, but then I just happen to love making films more now. So I totally get it, and it's very exciting. But then it's also very scary. How do you manage that fear of wanting to chase your passion? Because every single time, a lot of young people are mocked for guy, say passion not bring food for people and all of that. So how do you make sense of these passions and the fear around the passion?
Yeah, I mean, for me, at the time, I wasn't thinking of making a living at the time, which is, a crazy thing to say. But I mean, I thought about it as far as this is not what I want to do to make a living. That was it. But for me, living my secure day job was more a decision to survive, because it really felt like I was going to blow my brains out or something if I kept going. So it was a decision to survive, at least to find some kind of joy in my life, because there was no joy. Everything felt dark and drab, and like the sky was black and the clouds were hovering over me. It really felt really bleak at that point. So this was me grasping for air. So that was the first motivation: find some joy, find some light in my life. And with that decision to resign, immediately I got the first crack of light seeping through, and I was like, okay, this is something. Let me hold on to this. And then I started to chase, try to get more cracks through the cave to light my life. And, I remember going back home to Owerri, when my parents were there, and I told them, I don't want to do this job anymore. I really want to make films. And I was ready for them to give it to me and all of that, to tell me that, you're an old man, you're whatever, just whatever. But to my surprise, they were like, okay, fine. They really shocked you. Today, I still play back that scene. But I realized that, they knew me more than anyone else. They knew really what I loved ever since I was a child. In their mind, they were probably thinking, why didn't you say this sooner? Because that's always been my inclination ever since I was a child. And, I spent about a year plus after that resignation just working on my craft, trying to understand the technical aspects of film, making short films, terrible short films, but you have to make all of that. That was essentially my film school. That entire period, I was shooting, editing myself, trying to just have a grasp on it. But then I realized that I couldn't do this forever. At some point I have to go out in the field and make the film. And there were so many other failures in all of this period, by the way. So, but I realized I still have to throw myself in there. And, that was when I realized I had to move to Lagos. So the first time I actually came to Lagos, the first time in my entire life, in 2012. And I came to be a filmmaker. That was really the only thing that brought me to Lagos. And I came with a friend of mine at the time. He was going to be he was a music producer, but he also wanted to act. So he ended up making the score for my first film. But he lived in Lagos actually. So we came to, and we were staying in his house, and Lagos was just such a shock to me. Because he was living out in Okwafo, towards Badagry Road. So imagine coming from Owerri, a very peaceful, serene town, and you don't go to live in VI, or you go to live in Okwafo, all the way. I remember even driving, because we came by bus. So I remember even getting there at night, and the car ran over a corpse on the road or something. I was like, Lagos is different. And people were just it was normal, just another Tuesday.
Yeah. That culture, the cultural shock for any person, regardless of the city you're from.
Yeah.
When you move to Lagos, there's this cultural shock that you have.
Yeah.
And for me, I hear your story about moving to Lagos. But then first, I want to speak to something you mentioned, which is a lot of the first set of films that you made that were bad films, but then never really came out. But I'm always intrigued by the idea of seeing these films, because now people know what you can do, and how far you've grown, and the skill.
I'm not going to show them.
Why can't, maybe for a limited audience, and maybe for a training. So maybe
no, not going to happen. So the thing with those films, it's not even they were bad. Yes, they were bad. That's not even the dispute. It was me walking through my, whatever it was, I needed to understand I needed to understand how to light. I needed to understand how to edit. I needed to understand how to work with actors. So a lot of them were not even the scripts were just written really much in a hurry, because I wanted to shoot them. They would have noise all over it. They would have the sound. The sound was always terrible. So we had all these issues, and then I would try another one. shorts, it was all shorts. I tried one time to make a feature and I came close. But then again, sound was really bad. The color grading was really bad. And the editing wasn't very elegant. It wasn't really like there. But that was actually a good lesson for me to go through that film, because even in that messed up state, like the way the film was, bad sound, bad audio and everything, I showed it to the programmer at ECHO. There was a film festival called ECHO International Film Festival at the time. I showed it to him and he was like, wow, this is like Lars von Trier. Like the film is like Lars von Trier's film, and that he wants his audience at ECHO Film Festival to see. But I told him, but it's not even finished. He said it doesn't matter, that he's going to show it, that he wants people to see, that a young man is making something like this in Nigeria. I was like, oh wow, shit. So I had all this pressure, but then he ended up showing it, and he showed it, and it was like a terrible screening. The sound was all over the place. It was really bad. And I remember when people were asking me, like, even at it wasn't really a Q&A because I didn't come out, but people were standing up to talk about the film. And then somebody stood up and he said, so you made this film, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, so you made this film? Yeah, so okay. Well done. I was so crushed. I was super crushed like this. I was like, damn, oh my. And then, there was just this sort of feeling of tension and all of that. But my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife, she told me, yeah, don't worry. She was like super encouraging. And then, of course, my friend, he told me, they don't get you. They don't understand you. Don't worry. They'll understand, And then something good came out of all of that. There's a man called Farouk Lasaki. If you know him, he's like very big in the advertising world. Okay. And in Lagos, in Nigeria, actually, he had also seen that same cut. And he asked me to come to his studio and try and finish it there. So I went there, but for some reason I never could finish it. We tried everything. We even tried to do a review. It just wasn't working because I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I was shooting it. And the guy who was supposed to help me color it at the time, he fell into like really difficult times. And so I would start visiting his house. And at the time, he was living in a slum somewhere in Lagos, in Ikeja, sorry. And I would visit his house almost every day, just trying to walk through the color and the grading. There was a lot of noise, and then his computers was failing a lot. There was no light. We'd have to like buy gen, and we're broke as hell. So it was me going to this slum every day, trying to figure out what to do. And I was going to this slum, as I'm going to this slum every day, I start to notice that this slum has, first of all, it has like this long, narrow, winding path that leads into the slum. Like 1 minute you're in Ikeja, like in Allen, all of that. And then you almost felt like time travel, like you entered a wormhole. And then you're in Ikeja and you're seeing buildings and all of that. Next thing you're in a slum. And so every day I went back, I just thought more and more about the strangeness of this place and how, even though it was a small slum community, they had like, it was a microcosm. They had everything. They had, even like different parts of society. They had the good, the bad. They had like sex workers. They had gangs. They had, like small community, but they had everything. And then the more I interacted with the people there, and then I noticed that they had like one primary source of water where like all the water came from. And I imagine how, like a lot of water that people drink in Lagos comes from the lagoon. Like it's all like sort of connected.
Yeah, people drink Lagos
to the lagoon. And it's just where I just started to think more and more about this and how, till now, there's water being dumped in the lagoon, like toxic waste is constantly being dumped, even as we speak. And so that idea made me to start thinking, what would happen if the water becomes so contaminated that this tiny enclosed slum, it turns them into like zombie-like creatures, and they start to maul at each other. And then because it's like only one way in, ingress and egress, one way in, one way out, there's no way to go out, and they are trapped. And then until somebody manages to go out, but an infected person, then there's a possibility that it's going to get to the entire Lagos, and then of course to Nigeria. And so that idea, I was like, gotta type this out. And then I wrote it, and then that became Ojuju, which became my first film. Yeah.
That's exciting. So we're going to talk about Ojuju and the other films in your filmography, but I was listening to your panel after watching Old Town, and then you spoke about how you create films first for you.
Yeah.
And so I want to tie it to the places that have given your work inspiration, I would assume, which is Owerri, and then Badagry for some in some.
I mean, not just Badagry, like the slums of that area, and then certainly that particular slum in Ikeja. I shot a lot of the establishing scenes of Ojuju in Badagry, not Badagry, Bariga, sorry. Bariga, actually, because that's like literally the community that is under the bridge by the lagoon. So normally I would have made the entire film there, but it was just impossible to do. Like even while I was filming those establishing shots under the bridge, the gangs came for me, like right there. But luckily we knew somebody who was like, one of the mamale of the area was like, just let guys, they were like, oh mama, they just let us go. After we dropped a little bit of something, they let us go. So I just knew that it would be hell filming there. So we stayed luckily we already had like a place, and that was where we ended up making the film.
The question I want to ask is around cinematic language. And what I was driving with the Badagry conversation, Bariga conversation, and even Owerri is how that formed your cinematic language, how you express. Because yes, I get that you're inspired by Scorsese, Spielberg, and the rest, but the way you engage and see society and how you were raised by these communities should also filter into how you now tell stories.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would never make films the way I do if I wasn't born and raised in Owerri. I think just the sensibility that I bring to filmmaking is because of how I see the world. I still, see the world still like a small town Owerri kid in a lot of ways. And so I bring that to my filmmaking. And when I came to Lagos and making my first film, being set in a slum in Lagos, I still brought in that small town sensibility to the filmmaking, and how the people engaged with each other, how they talk to each other, the flavor of it, all of that. I tried to capture in cinema, because the thing about cinema is and visual language is that it has so many codes embedded in it, and your job as a filmmaker, as a director, is to try to figure out which of the codes translate well on screen. And so just because something works in reality or in real life doesn't mean it might translate well visually. I'll give you an example. With Nollywood films, there's the common denominator of, there's always shouting and all of that. And which is true. We do shout a lot in real life. You can't deny that. But does that translate well on screen? Does it make it more effective? Is it a more effective way of telling the story, or an effective way of showing that a character is angry? Like, just because you're angry, you have to shout, or just because he's funny, he has to, make like certain kinds of jokes and be just, you get my point. So for me, cinematic language is about finding the right codes that translate to the screen. It's not about translating. It's not just about taking reality and putting it on screen. It's about trying to translate reality for the screen. And so that was something I learned really early on, and in how I engage with, how I framed shots and things like that. So, when you watch my early work, whether it's Ojuju or Old Town, you see that there's just a special care as to, with how I use the camera. And sometimes I can use it sparingly, and sometimes I can go crazy and, and move the camera and do interesting things with the camera. But it's always motivated. There's always something driving the feeling. I mean, sometimes I do it because it's just cool, but for the most part, even when I'm doing it just because it's cool, it's still within the context of the overall style and tone of the film. It's never goes so crazy that it derails from, what binds the film together. And I think that was something I always was very aware of as a filmmaker. I feel like if you're making films, it doesn't matter how big your budget is, it doesn't matter how small your budget is, people should always feel like there is a driver behind this film. There's someone driving it. There's someone in control of the reins. Fortunately, now, coming up, we didn't really see a lot of that, as far as our films. And so I always gravitated to films that had a strong directorial voice behind it, a strong visual language, a strong style, a strong sense of identity, a strong place. And I just realized that was the kind of filmmaker I wanted to be.
Do you think that's changing in the Nigerian context now?
Oh, absolutely. And it had to. It really had to, because, the world has become such a global village. We used to say that growing up, but now it really has become that. Especially now that you have streamers and more people have access to the internet. You can't just live in your echo chamber and think that, everything is great or gravy in there. Whatever you make will be seen by, people across the Atlantic, across the Pacific. And so more and more people are paying attention to the kind of stories they tell and how they tell those stories.
So, still going back stylishly to the comment that, because when I was listening to your panel about making films first for self. Is that, how do you now, so now, and you also mentioned that over the years, you're now more open to having a conversation about it. So now, doesn't that take away from the need, because now Nollywood is in a place that everybody's worried about the commercialness of the industry and how we can move to a place that we can even attract bigger co-productions or even bigger films. So now, how does that, making films that reflect self and making films that would push an industry, how are we able to marry both in your
I can only speak from my point of view. And for me, I never saw the difference. And I still don't. I never, and I don't believe that just because you make a personal film means it's not commercial. I just never believed that. I know it's a very easy cop-out for a lot of people who are advocates of commercial filmmaking, whatever that is, for them to lean in and say, yeah, you have to make it commercial. You have to think of the audience. I disagree. I think the audience will watch something that entertains them. The audience will watch something that engages them, that makes them feel bad or good or makes them laugh or scared. The audience will engage with any material that makes them feel any of the, anything from these wide spectrum of emotions. That's what filmmaking is. And so I actually think that when you think of how you want to make them feel versus how you feel and how to translate that feeling, you're actually doing the work a disservice because you're not making it from an honest place. If you make a film from an honest place, it will connect with people. It will connect with a wider audience because guess what? We're all human at the end of the day. And so the more human you make, humane you make your cinema, the more emotional you make your cinema, the more layered you make it, the deeper you make your film. Then even though it's going in, but it's really going out. It's opening to more people. It's expanding to more people. And so for me, that's a different way of looking at commercialness of a film, rather than thinking of the commercialness of it and then making something that doesn't have any feeling or have any depth or have any kind of human emotion. It could be like, it could just be like a bubblegum film and people watch it and forget it. And if that's what people are into, and the filmmaker is comfortable with, then that's fine. But that's not why I became a filmmaker. I became a filmmaker to make a real impact with my films. I want my films to have, to make people keep coming back to it over and over again, to have a long shelf life, to have to people to make people to think about it. They come out, they laugh, they cry, they have real feelings. That for me is why I got into this game. And not anything else is just not worth it for me.
The many accolades you've gotten now with, say, Mami Water. Mami Water, now everybody claims it. If you're a filmmaker in Nigeria, you claim it. Because of the success globally. Does that type of success scare you for the next project or inspires you for how big the next project? Because now I'm like, it has gotten to every door that it needs to get to. But now you're like, the next thing I'm going to do, even though you're still pushing this actively and it's still doing all it's supposed to do, the next project you're going to do, are you worried about the power of or the extent it will go?
Not worried, excited. I'm extremely excited about it, and it's not just like one project that I'm working on, because I learned, this film thing is a business. And if you want to be smart about it, you have to have like several projects, especially after your breakout success. So, I took Mami Water to Sundance, which is like, as far as commercial film festivals go, it doesn't get more commercial than Sundance, because that's where if you're a filmmaker that wants to take his career to the next level, and by next level, I mean to be taken seriously in Hollywood, in the American market, which is the global market. Sundance is one way to do it, except it's not easy to get into Sundance, right? But, I did get into it, and it changed my life completely in every possible way you can imagine, just like they said it would, and so the thing that you do when you get into a festival like Sundance, the smart play is to have multiple projects, different things going, and you really don't know which of them will happen like next, except that there's the one in particular that I started developing while I was still on tour with Mami Water, called La Pyramide. Seems like the one that is like most, like in the front. Like other ones could be like behind in different stages, but this one is like really leading the pack in the race. So, I mean, I would be thrilled if it's the one that I make next. And it's really coming together nicely. We were just at Saudi Arabia, at Red Sea with the project in the market, the souk, which is the market there, pitching the project, having meetings with potential studios and producers and distributors that would be attached to the project. We've already started casting for it. And we shot a nice little teaser just to have a feeling of what it would be, because it's set in Brazil, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Senegal. And so I went to all these places, and then we shot just to have a feeling of what it would look like. And it already looks amazing, so, whatever you think Mami Water is it's on another level, it's like, but the thing is, it builds off of Mami Water, like the template of Mami Water, which is that emotional and that spiritual and that connection to identity and to self and to Africanness. It still has all of that, but on a much larger canvas and in color this time.
Okay, so this is very exciting. Even the scale of it, I'm very excited about it, and I really hope to see it soon. The next question I want to ask is around, do you think that money is the problem with Nollywood? Like access to this, because a lot of, with the streaming conversation, the exits of some of the streamers, A lot of conversations have come up with, oh, some people have gotten money, some people have said, oh, the monies are not enough. We need studios to come together to make bigger films. We need to tell bigger stories. We need to be more. Do you think money is the problem with the type of story, for the stories that we are telling to get global attention and retain some of these studios?
The simple answer is no, money is not our problem. Because we said that, and then we got the money, and then nothing changed. So money is not the problem, something else. And I think Nigerians, we have an issue, and this is not an accusation of all Nigerians. We all have that issue. We find it difficult to self-reflect. It's just a Nigerian thing. I don't know where it comes from. It's just how we are. We find it's a struggle. I know for me, I had to do a lot of self-reflection. Even to make Mami Wata, I spent 7 years just to get to a place where I felt like, okay, I can make this film, And I mean, I'm not saying everyone should spend 7 years on their film, but I'm saying that was what I felt I needed to do, just to get my head out of my ass and make something true and honest and real and authentic. And so we don't self-reflect. We like to have like a very simple answer to everything. Like even till now, people would look at a film like Mami Wata and everything it's done and say it's because it's black and white, or it's because it's an African story, or because white people like African stories. They'll always find an easy way to explain the work that needs to be done, or that has been done, and that has been holding us back, at least our creative industry, back for so long. Just this need to do the work that needs to be done. We know what it takes. We know how all the industries we admire. There's a work behind the scenes. There's a process to getting a film ready, to getting a script ready, to making sure that it's done right. To prepare it, to work on it, to create the lookbook, the treatment, to find somebody who can translate the script into a visual piece that speaks to people. There's a process to all of these things. But we think that we already know it, so we don't need to do the work. So all we need to make the masterpiece and to win Oscars is money. That's the only thing holding us back in our mind. And it's just not true. We need to understand we need to go back to the basics of filmmaking. There's over 150 years of filmmaking history to go back to. We didn't just appear and become great. There's a precedence to filmmaking, to the whole culture of cinema. And to think that you, who started, I'm speaking of the industry as a whole, that started in 94 or whatever, that you're 92, that you're going to be perfect or great. No, you're just a blip in the whole scheme of cinema. So humble yourself and learn what you need to learn and be great.
So I like that you, the word you used to try to explain what it is about, which is like us as filmmakers or the Nigerian filmmakers not taking time out to self-reflect or about the works we've done. But I wrote this is, do you feel that culture should be a major determinant in how the world should understand Africa? Or should we as filmmakers start to focus on what we want Africa to be?
Yeah, I think it's neither, it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think all expressions are valid as long as they are honest. I just feel that we don't make honest cinema. Like we're not being true to ourselves. Whatever that is, we're just making what we think is what people want to see. And then it shows because there's no depth, there's no feeling, there's no human connection. You're just making what you think is what, you slap a few things, you think, okay, if I put in a few laughs here and I have this big star and then I have some action in here and then it's all sort of all of these things like mishmash of several kinds of, templates, let me put it that way, that you think is going to make it together once you combine all of it. Like this sort of bizarre juxtaposition of ingredients that you just mash together. It doesn't work. Cinema is a language. It's fluid. It's it has a flow to it. It has a texture. It has a feeling to it. And so until you get in touch with your own feelings, you can't make that kind of film. You can't create like that. You have to get in touch with yourself. You have to be comfortable with emotion. You have to be you can't be somebody who doesn't feel anything and then you make something and you want people to feel something. You yourself, you have to be the kind of person who feels things. And then you can now make something that other people feel. So it's this sort of like all these deep reflections that make all the great filmmakers great. They understand human emotion the way regular filmmakers don't. They just do. They just understand how to connect to the core of a person. You watch their film and it just, they put in a string just in the right place and with the right sort of frequency and the right emotion behind it. The camera moves just right and it hits you. It just gets you in your feelings. That's cinema to me.
I know some people would have conversations about so the conversation will now be creating this cinema so they would reference some filmmakers like Funke Akindele, who creates a lot of films that excites a lot of Nigerians, and they troop out to watch her films in the cinema, and it shows in the monies she's made in the box office.
Yeah.
But now she has the opportunity to be shown across, I think, 30 countries in the world with the Now partnership.
Okay.
How do you think we can merge this? Because I did a program with some Germans, and then what us as the Nigerians were laughing at, the Germans were like, what's going on? Yeah. So how do we merge both? Because I understand from a business point of view, sometimes when we hear some of these stories, you need to put this big star here, you need to make something funny there and all of that. And it works in the Nigerian context. But when you're thinking big, when you're thinking the world, how do you merge both? That it's both very exciting for the people here and also exciting for the people who'd engage it, say, in Baden-Württemberg or something.
No, but those are like two very extreme opposites. So for me, it's not about trying to merge both worlds. I think, what Funke does is great for the market and it's great for the industry. My only issue is when it's only one thing. That is great for the market and great for the industry. You see what I'm saying? Because I feel like as a country, we are very diverse. We are 200 million plus people, whatever they say the census is. We are a lot of people. And when there's a lot of people, then you're going to have different people. And you can't say that you are different people and then you only feed them one thing. A good analogy is this, like think of a restaurant that has like the best jollof rice. Like just whatever the best jollof rice in your mind, think of that times 10. So a restaurant that cooks the best jollof rice, but that's the only thing they cook. It doesn't matter how great the jollof rice is. It doesn't matter if you eat it and you orgasm 100 times. It doesn't matter. One day you're going to want something else. You see what I'm saying? It's the same thing. So you can't, keep saying that this is the only thing Nigerians like. It's not. And you can't convince me otherwise. It's just not. And I think if we really want the industry to be taken seriously, we keep talking of global. The way to be taken seriously global is to be able to tell the world, we have this, but we also have this. And we have this other thing, and we have this. That's how you get the people to, have people to take you seriously, as a market, as a commercial market, because that is the real commercial viability. It's the ability to offer an array of products, not one thing. All quality products. And so, I don't know, maybe the way I look at commercialness is very different from how people look at commercialness. I look at commercialness as a spectrum, as a wide spectrum of offering, of things. And that for me is more exciting. That's how I want Nigeria to be seen,
Okay. How do we navigate the conversation about transparency of monies made in Nollywood? So, we know that, say, for example, the cinema monies that are released to excite people to even go, and then we're like, oh, we just got to 1 billion, we just got to 500 million.
Right.
So that is exciting. But then other monies are almost unaccessible. The monies, there's usually the sweat budget, and then there's a real budget that used to make the film. So why are we not transparent enough to say, I made this film for 100 million, but it's truly worth 400 million because, for example, I got this person, a partnership with this person. And do you think we need that as an industry?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, we do. Everything across the board, transparency. You need to have real transparency in order to, show the real big players that this is what goes in and this is what comes out. And that's also like, I've been privileged to be in certain rooms in the international space. It really is one of the reasons why nobody is playing with the people here. It's just this what you just asked now. There's no real paperwork. Like even when somebody says 1 billion, like how do you show me where? Like it's just, there's no real transparency. You can't trace anything. Like it's nothing. I know they have the ticket booking thing, but it's whatever they tell us that's what it is. There's no public place where you can go access it, like as an individual, which is how it is in every other part of the world. So what are we hiding? What are we, what's all this smoke and mirrors for? You see what I'm saying? So, and knowing the history of our country, it just makes you question things. We already have PTSD from all the corruption that we've dealt with over the years, over the decades, and to now have like the possibility of a booming industry, and then you now start seeing the same smoke and mirrors. It just makes you doubt things, and so no, that is not helping us at all.
Okay. How far or how hugely did Mami Water change your life? Because I hear it changes anybody's life going to Sundance. It changes anybody's life winning across the many awards across the world, both locally and internationally. But financially, because when I remember a lot of the conversations, some of the panels I watched of you about some of the partners that pulled out, you making the film, the monies required to make the film during COVID and all of that, raising all that financing for the film. Yeah, I know that it would feel worth it that the film eventually did all of that, but the money didn't make sense eventually for you.
Yeah, the money made sense because, the money makes sense. The idea for Mami Water was always for it to be like a long-term earner. It was never meant to be like a film that made 1 billion out of all the... No, it was never, sorry. It was never meant to be that kind of film. It was the kind of film that makes money, like brings in income, and, everybody gets a piece of the pie. All the investors gets a piece, over time. This was well explained to everybody that was coming on board. So nobody was expecting to go and make, all of that crazy. It was supposed to build over time, and because it's going to be like in USD or Euro, it made sense for anybody that was coming on board, right? So that was the business structure, the financial plan, and I have, my producer, who's my wife, she's, really fantastic in finding all of these sort of right partnerships and people, who came on board. And obviously we put in our own money, because a film like this, you have to bet on yourself, because not everybody understands the vision. And so we put in a significant chunk of the overall budget in the film. And also to have control, just to have that creative control it was very important to me as well. But all our partners, they came on board knowing fully well what it was. And, if we had gone straight from Sundance, and we had the opportunity to do that, to go straight from Sundance to a streamer, and it doesn't go to any film festivals, it doesn't go to any cinema, that would have been a very different life of the film. You wouldn't have had any of these accolades you were talking about. A lot of these international awards that require that the film would have been released in cinemas. It would have had a completely different life. Maybe it would have been on Netflix and people would be like, oh yeah, cool. But, there are like 5 billion movies there, and then it would just disappear into the abyss of zeros and ones. Like I don't think it would have as much impact as it does now. And so we turned down any possibility of it going to the streamer, because a lot of the streamers, they also require like international world rights, and we knew we couldn't do that. If maybe they had been open to like an African regional rights, maybe we would have had that conversation. But they insisted straight, world rights and all of that, which we were not prepared to do, because we wanted the film to have a long life. We wanted it to have like proper cinema distribution in the USA, proper cinema distribution in the UK, in Australia, in Switzerland, in Germany, and all of these, and it did. And to be honest, Nigerian films are not doing that. You're not getting Nigerian films shown in American cinemas and European cinemas alongside European films or American films being scheduled. Like, if you see the run of Mami Water, it's crazy, because, you would go to a cinema in the UK, for example, in Sheffield or whatever, and you would see like the big poster of Mami Water, and then you would see like, some big studio tentpole film right next to it. They were programming it alongside every other film. So it's a different market space. And what that does for me as a filmmaker, just thinking strategically, and as a hardcore Igbo man that I am, I understood what it meant and what it would do for my career. It's a different kind of conversation. If I want to have a meeting with anybody, I can. Why? Because I've done that. I've been able to enter that space. They can look at my numbers in the UK. They can look at my numbers. It's not going to be like crazy like the Hollywood numbers, but it's the numbers of an African film made by a Nigerian that broke into those spaces. So it's a different way of looking at me when I'm talking money. Funny enough, they'll be more open to working with me on that level than with the guy who is maybe making $1 billion or $1 trillion in Nigeria, which is a weird thing, right? So it's just a different metric of looking at commercial success. Again, that's what I keep saying. I've never looked at myself as, all the labels they put on me, commercial, artistic, art house, filmmaker, whatever. It's fine if that's how you want to feel about me. It's fine, but I've never seen myself as anyone who. Just to be clear, I've always seen myself as a guy who makes films that are commercial. That's just how I see myself. I've never seen myself as that my films are so inaccessible that they won't make money. And I mean, my life is a testament to that. I don't do anything else. I'm a filmmaker full time. And that's how I make a living.
Okay. Final question would be around collaboration. You did collaborate with two of your friends for Juju Stories.
Yes.
What's that experience like, and how important? Because I did try something similar. We tried creating a film, like the way it was structured for,
like an anthology.
Yes, okay. We called it Flames, which had it was really cool. It had different emotions and the way it was, but then it never saw the light of day. We might pick it up. We've done 3 episodes. Three of the. Three of the parts of the film. But then I want to speak about the partnership of that and the journey of that.
Yeah, I mean, that came through the formation of the collective. We formed the collective in 2016, Sorry 16 Collective. And we immediately knew that we had to make films together. Like individually, we're making films, but collectively, we had to make work together. And the first work we did collectively was Visions, which is a short film, and it's on YouTube. You can check it out. And it's a 19-minute short film, also in three parts. And so we had great success with that for something that we made with no money. And then we were like, okay, now we have to make a feature of the same anthology structure, but a feature film, because that you can monetize. So we need money to do that. Not a lot of money, but we need money to do that. And it ended up becoming a success because we already we already formed the collective with this mindset of working together, of collaborating. And this was even before we started our film festival. We were just like, okay, we need to make films together. And it was really a great experience making that film. And we were lucky to just wrap right before the lockdown. And so we spent the entire lockdown editing the film, finishing the film.
Do you think we need more of that type of expressions in the Nigerian context? And what does he do for the three of you?
I mean,
the partners.
We need all kinds of expressions in the Nigerian context. So it still goes back to my whole thing about why we only make films like one way, or two ways, big deal, two ways. We need like 100 or 1,000,000 ways of making films. We have 500 ethnic groups in the country. We have, so many languages. There are so many stories that haven't been told, so many expressions that we haven't explored. So yeah, everything is welcome. Anthologies, non-linear stories, any kind of thing should be welcome as an expression. Like we should be the country that is known just the way we've made a name in music and in literature. We should be able to do the same in film. And there's nothing stopping us. We're the ones that put all these limitations on ourselves, funny enough. Nobody ever told you that you couldn't do it. You just thought to yourself and decided that this is the only thing that works and I'm going to stick to it. So you're the one who placed the limitation on yourself. And so for me, I never saw it. And certainly we never saw it in the collective. We never saw any barriers to doing anything. So we just came in with, in fact, the only thing that surprised us was that people disagreed. People disagreed. That it was like, really? You don't think this is cool? You don't think this is like, that was always like the thing that we never could understand. Like, why don't you see how cool this is? But apparently we had to do it, and then people are starting to come around. I don't want to entirely take the credit, or the collective taking the credit of the shift in the industry. But what I'll say is, I know the kind of films that were being made before 2016 when we started the collective. And I know the kind of films that are being made now. So however you want to look at it, there was at least something that changed in that period that we said, we're not going to make films like this, but we're going to make films like this. And then everybody said, no, you can't. And said, yes, we can. And then we did. And then gradually I'm beginning to see things happening in certain spaces that it would have never happened before. So at the end of the day, we don't even need the credit, but the change is here, right?
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for this very beautiful conversation. I really hope that Nollywood gets bigger and better. And then you can also reflect and look back as one of the people who truly was a part of pushing Nollywood to where it's supposed to be as a global player. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us for this beautiful episode of the Good News Niger podcast. Please, it's important that you like, share, and subscribe. And also follow us on social media at the Good News Niger podcast everywhere. See you on the next episode.